The Equalizer 3 is directed by Antoine Fuqua and stars Denzel Washington, Dakota Fanning, and among others. And in this story, it deals with Robert McCall, who, not going to go into too much detail, but he's essentially hiding out in a little town in Italy, and he ends up coming across new friends of Italy. And much like you see in the other two Equalizer films, he starts to get to know some folks there and wants to be pretty much like a role model for a lot of people and try to do good for others. And along the way, he ends up seeing that they're being intimidated by this organization from this mafia organization called the Camorra. And he seeks out to pretty much try to protect them and, avenge basically whatever problems that are causing along the way that this organization is doing. Now, here's a little backstory. Now, this movie was directed by Antoine Fuqua, who I've been an avid fan of from a lot of his films that he's directed, especially from Training Day, which he originally, started out working with Denzel Washington on, and also with other films that he did, including the first two Equalizer films, which I actually had to take a while to actually see the first Equalizer because I didn't see it when it first came out. I finally got a chance to watch it some years ago, and I rewatched it recently and prepared for the new one. And I got to really get a kick out of it because the first movie really dealt with some really good stuff involving with the mystery of Denzel's character and stuff, and a lot of the mindset of him pretty much trying to be like, he's basically like a cross between like, I would say he's basically like a mixture of, well, in a good way, like Charles Bronson's character from like the Death Wish films mixed in with like I guess like basically Mr. Rogers, if that makes sense, where that kind of really, kind of guy who wants to really do good for others and stuff. And I really enjoyed the first one with how much, skills that it showed that this guy wasn't messing around when it came to, defending people from all the trauma that was caused, especially with the Russians in the first one. And Denzel Washington just really owned that role so much. And from what I also heard was that the film was also based on a TV series that came out, I think, in the 80s. I haven't seen the original TV series, but maybe one of these days I'll get a chance to check it out. And then when the second film came out in 2018, I didn't check it out when it originally was released because I just kind of skipped out in theaters because it just wasn't really something I was going to seek out to watch, especially since I didn't really see the first one. So it took me until actually this year when the third one was coming out when I finally got a chance to watch the second one. And it's kind of a good reason I didn't really, watch it when it first came out because I will be honest that I didn't really care too much of the second film. It was kind of a middle-of-the-road kind of movie for me to where it just, kind of came and went where the action is there. It does have some good stuff with Denzel, still doing what he does best. And the villains, they do kind of up some stuff this one. I'll give it more credit for, but I did feel like it was kind of a very bloated type of sequel that kind of tries too much and overstuffs too much to make it feel like very episodic. Because there's a lot more subplots that happened in the second film that they took the focus away of what it was trying to do. And so I wasn't really the biggest fan of the second film, but I still thought it was a decent watcher it was just a decent watch. Now the third one, it was another one that I just didn't really have like high expectations for because since I didn't see the second one, I had to like really rewatch the other two films to really get interested with the third one. And I can honestly say that after upon seeing the third film, which I also went to go watch with my parents because they're a big fan of the first two films, I gotta really admit I enjoyed the third one a lot. It has some issues that kind of hold it back from being great, but it definitely was a huge step up from the second film. And I don't really know if I like it more in the third or the first one, but I'd say it's still at least on par or at least matches the quality of the first film in a big way. And so to get my pros out of the way, I thought the cast in this were fantastic, especially with Denzel Washington, doing what he does best with playing Robert McCall and utilizing him pretty much doing a lot more stealthier stuff this time where he really does seem like he's in a slasher film in certain scenes where he's killing the bad guys and stuff, and then that very good nature type of vibe that he brings to the role. And just any role that Denzel Washington always plays, I'm always getting a kick out of. And he just, even in the movies that don't always turn out so great, it shows how much committed he is. And he's one of my all-time favorite actors, and he really showcases a lot for a character that he does that you just never really see him really doing sequels for. And this is one of those franchises where even though he's more even though he does a lot more drama stuff, it's good to see him play out more in the action roles like this, and also when he worked with Anton Fuqua also on Magnificent Seven. So I think the director of these movies and him makes such a good collaboration that I'd be really like to see what else they do next in the future together. But Denzel Washington just always brings a good commanding presence on screen, and he really has some really fun moments that I thought were really great, especially that scene where he's breaking that one bad guy's wrist and stuff and taunting him and everything. He has such really funny comeback lines that I really get a kick out of. And another big surprise, surprisingly, was actually seeing Dakota Fanning in this, because keep in mind I hadn't really watched all of Man on Fire before I saw most of it. I thought that they originally together in that film, and it's a good reunion with him and her coming into this one, especially with her playing this kind of agent that's basically on the trail of Robert and a lot of the stuff that's going down in Italy and stuff. And she does serve a purpose, but there's certain things I do kind of have I kind of have a con with her character on, and that mainly has to do with the writing. But it's still a joy to see her, and she really does still have some great chemistry with Denzel Washington in this, like they did in Man on Fire. And and just the rest of the cast are great too. And to get my other pros, I will have to say too, this movie, I think out of the three films of the Equalizer, this is the most brutal at what I've seen so far, because there are scenes where you're seeing not only heads popping off, gunshots, but also decapitations. You mainly see certain scenes that deal with the aftermath of the bodies and stuff, but when the shit hits the fan, this movie gets really brutal to the point that I was really on the floor watching, and it also gets some really kind of on the good direction that Antoine Fuqua does, because there's a certain scene that happens that kind of has a jump scare that I didn't see coming, and it really knows how to really build its tension up pretty well. And for the first hour or so, we were trying to really get to know a lot of what's going on in the city. I really felt for the characters in this, and even though a lot of the characters that are thrown into this aren't really given a whole lot of depth, so to speak, I still felt their presence with going along with Robert McCall because of how much he cares for the people. And it really works as a whole together with McCall trying to really do everything he can to try to stand up for people and stuff like he is in the other films. And so that worked really well. And then you also have the cinematography and especially the production design where it takes place in Italy and stuff, I thought was really outstanding. And it makes me really wish I get a chance to go to Italy, because one of my dreams is to eventually go to places in Italy like in Florence and all that. So seeing a film that's set in this kind of setting, you can see a lot of the great architectures and a lot of the stuff that they see in a lot of the cities and stuff, and just really beautiful areas that they really shoot the very beautiful areas of where it's shot at. And then on top of that, one of the other biggest things I have to really appreciate the most is the way that the movie does have some really interesting kind of twists that reveal, especially when it comes to a certain character that's kind of related to another character to another character from another film that I thought was a good reveal. To get into some of my cons, I will have to say that as much as I was really getting into the story of McCall having to really get into the stuff involving with the little town in Italy, I did feel like what held it back was that the villains themselves, on paper, I could see what they were trying to be, because if this was trying to be basically a trilogy, I think that if you were going to go all out, you probably wanted to go with your most highest level type villain. And there are elements that can work, because there's certain scenes where the villains can be intense at times, and you see that they have a presence that could really be more fleshed out better, especially when, I'm not going to go spoilers, but let's just say that there's an incident that takes place at an airport or something like that. I'll leave it there, but you could see that there's certain elements that could work if it was done better, because unfortunately what holds it back is that the villains in this, they really, other than maybe I think if I recall one person, they don't really kill anyone. They really don't really get to do much that really fleshes out their main villain in this that much, because it really feels very standard. And they also feel like some of the other ones, like the more lesser known henchmen and stuff, they really feel like they're very dumbfounded for the way that they're trying to be, all knowing about what Robert McCall can do and stuff. And so that I think was a really big drawback, because I feel like if you're going to go with your biggest villains, especially if it being a third film, you wanted to kind of go with more of seeing what more kind of destruction they can do. Now I appreciate that they go into a kind of grounded level, so to speak, where it gets to a climax that I really enjoyed. And I could see some of the complaints that maybe some have where it could have been a lot more epic and stuff with the climax. But with these kind of films, they were meaning to basically kind of go in a more grounded sort of approach and not really kind of go all John Wick and stuff, if that makes sense. And so I didn't really mind it so well with what they do at the climax, but I just wish that the villains could have really, got to do more devastation. So that was one of my biggest drawbacks. And on top of that, it does feel like there's certain things, and this is kind of a problem I've had with the other two films, where there's a certain point where vulnerability comes into question with Robert McCall, and there's certain conveniences I think are a little too good that makes it seem like the stakes can be high, but also they feel like things get resolved a lot more quickly than expected, if that makes sense. And so I'll leave it at there, because that kind of plays into some stuff that gets into some major spoilers. But overall, though, I still really enjoyed the Equalizer 3, and if this is going to be the last one in the series, I'm glad that they at least went out on a good note to go on. But if they ever decide to do more or do whatever they want with this franchise, I wouldn't be surprised. But I can see why maybe at this point in their life that they probably wanted to cut it quits early, because Denzel is getting old, so I can see why they probably just wanted to keep it as just a trilogy. But who knows? We may see whatever happens in the future. I'm at least keen on what they do with it. So overall, with that being said, I'm going to give the film a very high, extremely high, compelling grade on the Film Freaks meter. So for those of you who have also seen the Equalizer 3 and also the other films in the Equalizer franchise, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.